Kent Ellingson.
Bob
Kent,
Lauren.
my old friend.
Hey, man, it's been too long.
Well, listen, you want to know how long it's been? I mentioned this to you yesterday when we chatted briefly. 40 years ago, 1984, is when you and I met, I believe, at the University of North Texas State University.
1984, yeah, okay, I believe that. Yeah,
Yeah, is that
because
when
we
you?
actually didn't know each other at all until we both started the doctoral program.
That's right. Okay, so it was somewhere that mid '80s, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It may have been a year after that, but who's counting, man? Who's counting?
Yeah, who's counting?
But anyway, Bob, it's great to see you. It really is.
Likewise, great to see you, my friend. So, yeah, it's been a long time. Those North Texas days, man, I think about them often. That was a great time, man.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. And it allowed us, even though we were involved in the doctoral program, we had time to hone our craft.
That's right.
While going to school there for sure.
Yeah, and I mentioned it to so many different folks. I mentioned that I had Bert Ligon on jazz piano skills, another North Texas guy, and I mentioned to him that I loved my days at North Texas. I learned a lot in the classrooms, but honestly, I think I learned more in the hallways, hanging out with guys like you and other musicians and players. It was just a fantastic hang, the entire time.
Yeah, right, and that's the true value of going to school there, I mean, the classes and the great instructors are one thing, but just the constant, relationships and the playing that you get in outside of the classroom is really valuable.
Yeah, right. It's amazing, and it continues to be like that every stinking year, man. I talk to young lions that are up there learning and studying now, and it's the same thing. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable. So yeah, we met during our doctoral days at the University of North Texas, and that was fabulous. And
yeah, now Bob, I do have to tell everybody who's listening that one of us finished the doctorate degree and the other one didn't. So congratulations to you, Bob. You stuck it out.
Yeah, it's a miracle, dude.
I had enough.
Yeah.
I had enough. ABD.
Yeah, I get it, man. I get it, man. But if anyone deserves a doctorate, my friend, it's you. I can guarantee you that.
You're very kind.
No, that's the truth. So look, man. Today, having you on Jazz Piano Skills, I want to talk about a whole lot of stuff, man. It's going to be a really fast hour, but I want to start. I want to just kind of turn the microphone over to you because there's a lot. We shared a lot with each other during our days and our school days together, but I want you to kind of rewind the clock a little bit, kind of share with Jazz Piano Skills listeners your life story, man. How you got into jazz. You're from the Minnesota area, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, Fargo, North Dakota originally.
Oh, Fargo,
is right across the river from Minnesota.
Yeah. Fargo, that's it.
I'm still a diehard Minnesota sports fan.
Maybe that's why I was thinking Minnesota, because you're a big Twins fan.
Yeah, right. Well, still am, but I tell you what, Vikings and all that, I have lived a very hard life. No way of getting around that one.
Yeah, there's no way of getting around that, man.
Well, Bob, if I go back, for me, I took piano lessons when I was a kid and really didn't care for it at all. It was all the note reading stuff.
Yeah, right.
And my teachers never went beyond that. But I mean, I'm not blaming anybody here. But it really wasn't until I got a chance to actually look at the other side of music playing, and that's being able to read chord symbols and being able to improvise and that sort of thing. So most of my time was spent. I actually played saxophone too in band throughout from 5th grade through 12th grade, and my piano was kind of left behind in all this. And furthermore, I much preferred to go outside and play various sports with my friends who are out in the yard or whatever.
Right.
I had no thoughts about ever entertaining music as a career. But I will tell you that one of the things that created an impression on me to this day is my band director in high school suggested to go to a jazz camp. And it was that at the time, I don't think it's there anymore, but it was the Peace Gardens Music Camp at a location that where North Dakota and Canada share the border. It's way up there at the north end of the state. And it just so happens that, I didn't know anybody because I was just a high school junior and real ignorant. But as it turns out, the faculty there included David Baker,
Wow.
Jamie Abersol,
Wow.
Dan Hurley, Charlie Craig on drums. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
That's amazing.
And so I'm a real ignorant teenager going to hear them for the first time. And I thought to myself, oh, man, I love this. And they're incredible. And I'm blown away. Now, at that same week, Jamie Abersol had a records listening class. And as it turns out that on one of the albums that he decided to play a song from was from Herbie Hancock. Let's see. What is that album? The one with Chameleon on it. Oh man. But anyway, he played a couple cuts off that album, and that did it for me, man. As soon as I went home at the end of the week, I bought that album.
Well, that album did it for a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that completely changed my life. I remember listening to it before I would go to sleep every single night for about the last year, or for the next year. Yeah, it was incredible. And so that really influenced me to say to myself, you know what? There is a way of playing that goes beyond the way that I have learned.
Right.
And so I was a non-declared major in college. I went to University of Minnesota Moorhead. But I did sign up for band that first semester. And during that semester, a friend of mine gave me a call and said, I hear you're still playing saxophone. So I've got this little combo. And would you like to join us? And I thought to myself, okay, well, I'll give it a try. And that was another big influence on my life, because then for the first time, I actually got real hands-on playing in a jazz combo situation. And no, Charlie Parker, I was not. But, I ended up basically, I played blues. I like to play little blues things. So basically every single tune we played, I would just rely on my little blues licks.
You'd make that fit no matter what, man.
Well, Bob, and then during that time, at one point when I was in that combo, the person who was playing piano, and he had a Fender Rhodes piano, he decided that he wanted to go back to his original love, drums. And at that time, then I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and buy this. I can't remember. He sold it to me for a decent price. So I bought the Fender Rhodes piano, really had no idea how to play it, but I was more interested thinking of that Herbie Hancock sound. I was more interested in playing, in playing keyboard stuff than I was saxophone stuff.
Yeah.
And so from that point on, I concentrated more on playing piano type things. I played in a couple of rock bands in Fargo, North Dakota. There's not a whole lot of jazz up there to tap into, although I do know that in recent times they've really stepped it up in terms of a wide array of offerings, and there's a lot going on in that city. I got to give it credit. Fargo, North Dakota.
That's awesome, man. A little shout out to Fargo.
Yeah, right.
You know what's fascinating? Okay, you're in college at this time, man. You're at college playing saxophone, and you're making the switch over to piano in your college days.
Yes.
But
now, Bob, keep in mind, I took piano lessons from age 7 through age 12. Okay. So I had these exercises where I was reading notes, and little Bach pieces and that sort of thing, easy Bach and easy Mozart and that sort of thing. And I'm sitting there waking up every morning going, God, my mom made me practice a half hour a day. So the first thing in the morning, that's what she would pretty much have me do, is practice at least a half hour a day before I could join my friends playing basketball, baseball, you name it. Right. But yeah, so I stopped, and for the next 6 years of my life, I had nothing to do with piano.
Yeah.
And then at the end of my senior year, I noticed that I was noodling on my parents' piano more and more and more. I was kind of missing those little old songs. So I got out the old piano books. And so that along with Herbie Hancock revived my interest in wanting to really learn keyboard. Yeah.
You know, it's fascinating. I think we may have talked about this, man, when we were back in school together. Because what's fascinating is I was a drummer all the way through high school.
Really?
Yeah, I played drums, man.
I'm sure you told me that at one time, but I've kind of forgotten that.
And then I switched to piano in college as well. And what's fascinating about that is I had a teacher named Mrs. Feldhahn. I'll never forget it, man. You and I must have the same mom, because my mom, I had a few little piano lessons from Mrs. Feldhahn in the neighborhood, which was really embarrassing because next door to Mrs. Feldhahn was our high school coach, our high school football, baseball, basketball coach where he lived. And he would always go so I'd be at baseball practice and he'd go, "Did you have your piano lesson today?" You know, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it didn't last very long, piano when I was young, and I focused on drums. I wanted to be Louis Bellson, Buddy Rich,
But even back in those days, you were aware of the jazz medium.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't. But I was full on drums, and then like you, I started dabbling back into the piano again, and I would play drums behind great jazz piano players, and I would think, "Dang, man, I'm on the wrong instrument, man."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's funny. Our past, in many ways, very similar.
Yeah. Right. I would agree with that. Yeah. Now, when you were in college, where did you go to school in undergraduate?
Undergraduate was in Iowa, St. Ambrose University, a little small liberal arts school.
Okay, did they have a jazz band, and were you involved in it?
The jazz band was horrible, and I did play. I played drums in that jazz band, actually.
Oh, so you didn't play piano?
No, I played drums in that jazz band. Yeah. And I played piano on the side, and I got a little group put together, a little jazz trio, and played in some hotels and that kind of thing, in lounges and that. And that's how I got started really going with the jazz piano.
Okay, well, I got to tell you, so I'm playing in these rock bands when I'm in college, and I'm now at the point where I'm actually playing triads, even an occasional seventh chord, pretty with confidence. Okay, so I'm going to school at University of Minnesota Moorhead, and my third year, somebody knew that I was dabbling in keyboard. They heard me in the practice room, and they said, "Hey, our stage band needs a piano player." And I said, "Oh, really?" Well, the director at that time was Dr. Al Noyce, also another major influence on my life, and he got wind of the fact that somebody had talked to me about doing this, and so he talked to me. He goes, "Hey, why don't you come in? We need a piano player. I won't say a word to you for, let's say, the first week or two. You just get yourself comfortable, and we'll see what happens." Okay. So there I am, and I remember the first day. I think they played something like 1 o'clock jump in the key of D flat. Now, I could barely at that time play a D flat triad, let alone all these seventh chords and
alter dominance,
2-5-1s and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I know that he thought that I really stunk, but to his credit, he was willing to go with me for about 3 weeks to a month, and then I remember he gave me a Count Basie record to listen to, and then he said, "Now listen to this real carefully to try to understand the concept of swing." And so I put it on and I listened to it, and I will tell you that by the end of the month, he actually came up to me and he goes, "I think you're doing a really good job. You're listening and you're really improving, and I think you got a place with us." So for the next 2 years, then I played in that jazz band, the Moorhead State. At that time, it was Moorhead State University, but a University of Minnesota Moorhead jazz band. And actually, the jazz band had at that time had really quite a good reputation.
Oh, wow. Wow.
The Eau Claire Jazz Festival, I think they participated in before I was in it and did really well.
Yeah.
So they had a name to go with themselves, and that solidified my wanting to continue my pursuit of jazz piano.
Wow, that's fascinating, man. When you started that first month, I know he had to be thinking, well, he's got a long way to go, but he's the best we got. So we got to ride this horse all the way to the end.
No, I remember a couple kids in the band telling me afterwards, that when I could do it, that there would be times when I'm playing and he would just kind of look at everybody and kind of go like, yeah. But no, man, he stuck with me, and I will forever. He's no longer with us, but he stuck with me, and I will forever be grateful.
Oh, that's
for
fantastic.
His patience.
Well, Kent, I mean, this is such a great testimony to you because I've always felt this about you. You learn so fast, so quickly. You're like a sponge, man. You soak everything in, and so it doesn't surprise me at all to hear your background, to hear your story. That here you are in college, getting your hands on a keyboard and diving in,
picking up the place.
Yeah, I mean, but and learning as you go, right, and figuring it out, and listening to albums, and then getting back into the practice room and learning these chords. And man, what a great testimony to you. So okay, so at some point, then you said to yourself, "I'm going to go to North Texas State University."
Yeah, yeah, and by the way, true story. So one of the better saxophone players in Fargo, North Dakota.
Oh my gosh!
I'm playing a gig, and I've graduated now from University of Minnesota Moorhead, and I'm talking to him on break, and he goes, "So what are you going to do next year?" He goes, "Well," and I said, "Well, my plans are to go to University of North Texas."
North Texas State.
He just looked at me and kind of smiled. And he goes, "Well, there's a lot of good players down there." That's all I got from him. Not like, "Oh God, man, best of luck, and hope you do as good as possible." Just, there's a lot of good players down there.
There's a lot of good players down there, man.
So anyway, hey, by the way, one other person that I have to acknowledge is Dr. David Ferreira, who was the first person I took jazz piano lessons with, and this was up in Fargo Moorhead. He was a teacher at University of Minnesota Moorhead. And he basically got me going on the basics, like showing me things like, 2-5-1s and showed me the proper way to play the blues and using different chord alterations. And so, yeah, I got to give a shout out to him because here too, if I hadn't had those few lessons that I did with him, I probably would never have gone.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, right? Because thank goodness we were, and I mean this in the most sincere and complimentary way, thank goodness you and I were ignorant to just how good the players were at North Texas. That that we packed up our that we packed up our bags and headed south. Man, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, right. And so I don't know if you had the same experience, Bob. But my first year at University of North Texas, it was a tough one, man.
Oh yeah,
it was a really tough one because I wasn't getting any calls for any gigs. And the first semester that I went there, which was, I believe, the fall of 1981. So I auditioned for Dan Hurley. A big shout out to Dan, man. What a great guy, and God bless his soul, rest in peace. But I learned so much from Dan.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, so, as it turns out, Bob, I did not make a band. Okay. Right. But at the last minute, he found a spot for me to play in a combo. Do you remember John Mossblad?
Oh yeah.
It was John Mossblad's combo. They needed a piano player.
Wow.
Just like my first college needed a piano player. So I signed up quickly. I mean, I beat the deadline by just a few hours. So I signed up quickly. So I was in combo class playing with John Mossblad's combo, and I learned a lot that year from playing with him. Yes. Yeah. And I remember I auditioned for and made the Bruce Hall big band. So there you go. So I was playing in a combo, didn't make a big band at University of North Texas, but I got to play at the Bruce Hall big band.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, so my life was complete.
You're right.
But Bob, yeah, just like you, man, we were both so ignorant.
Oh my gosh.
So ignorant. But in retrospect, I'm glad I stuck it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're a monster player now, dude.
Well, that's very kind of you, Bob.
Yeah, no, you're a fabulous jazz pianist. I love your playing.
Well, and I've gotten, because of what I've been able to accumulate over the years, I've also gotten a lot of teaching and clinicking opportunities. and have been grateful for that too. As a matter of fact, Bob, next week I am going to be involved in the Collin College Jazz Camp.
Oh,
I was
fantastic,
just
man.
informed yesterday that there are a total of 12 piano players signed up. Well, I've been involved with that camp for many years, and I've never had more than, I think, 8. So
Well,
I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I was thinking to myself, since we're talking, hey, man, would you like to assist in this camp? Do a little teaching on the side?
Hey, dude.
Help me out, Bob.
Yeah, hey, I'd love to, man. Send me the details. There would be nothing more I would enjoy than hanging out with you and talking jazz and helping these young kids and having some pizza. That'd be great. That'd be great. Hey,
but it's a great week. It really is. And they always bring a guest artist, and so faculty does a fair amount of playing on this camp too.
Oh, fantastic. Real quick, Dan Hurley story. This is, again, to just magnify just how ignorant at least I was when I got to North Texas. I went in for my audition with Dan. Remember those auditions, man? You stand in the hallway and people are lining up and you got to go in his office and play. Right? Yeah. So I go in and I get done. I play for him, and this is hilarious. I still remember this like it was yesterday. I played. He goes, "What are you going to play?" I said, "I'd like to play Duke Ellington's I Got It Bad and That Ain't Good." And he goes, "Oh, great tune." So I get done playing the tune. He says to me, "What was that?" That's what he said. He goes, "What was that?" And I said, and I was confused because I had told him what I was going to play before I played. So he goes, "What was that?" And I said, "Well, that was Duke Ellington's I Got It Bad." And he goes, "I know what the tune was." He goes, "What were you playing?"
Oh no!
I said, "What was I playing?" I said, I don't know how to answer that." And he goes, "Did you think that was jazz?"
Ouch.
Yeah, ouch, right? And
ouch.
And I said, "Yes." He goes, "No." He goes, "Man, listen, man." He goes, "Jazz has already been invented."
Yeah, Bob.
He did. He said, "Jazz has already been invented, man." He goes, "You're trying way too hard."
Yeah, okay.
Right? So anyway, I'll never forget that. And I shared that story with him years later, right? And it was so funny. I shared that story with him years later, and he got all sad. He goes, "I'm sorry, man." He goes, "I'm sorry." I did, because he got so soft. He got to be this grandpa type guy. Toward the end of his life, he was real sweet.
Yeah.
And he taught on faculty here at the Dallas School of Music for 8 years, so I got to hang with him every day. But he goes, man, he would apologize. "Oh, I mean, I'm so sorry." He goes, "Did I really say that to you?" I said, "Yeah, you really said that to me."
Okay, Bob, I got my own first audition with Dan Hurley story.
Okay.
So of course, I've been preparing this piece, and and I was waiting in line just like you did, and finally it was my turn. And I was all nervous, and he came to me. He goes, "Well, we did our introductions to each other." And he goes, "Okay, so you got a tune you can play for me?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "What will it be?" And I said, "Misty." and so I played Misty with all the imperfections I could give him. And when it was done, he just sort of stroked his beard and said, "Yeah, that's an often played tune." And that's basically what he said. Now I do remember he did like my blues playing.
Oh, good.
On that audition.
Good.
In fact, I think he was surprised I could play the blues as well as I could, considering I did a hatchet job on of all tunes,
Misty. See, man, Kent, those are memories. I mean, yeah, they're fantastic. They weren't great memories at the moment, but they're great memories now, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing, Bob, that I had problems with in those first couple of semesters was reading.
Oh, yeah, we all did.
My note reading.
We all did. Yeah.
Because I think that's what hurt me the most in my audition was my inability to sight read effectively.
Yeah.
The example that he gave, which, in retrospect, wasn't hard at all.
Right. But you know what? It's amazing, right? Because if you take the lab bands up there at North Texas from the 1 o'clock down, you take that. You got guys playing in the 9 o'clock. You got guys playing in reading bands in 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock lab bands that are monster players. They just
Absolutely.
can't. They just can't read.
Yeah, right.
They're just
Right.
monster players. You know.
Yeah. But
So,
but you know, you and I both know the value of being able to read, like on a gig,
oh
in a
my
studio
gosh.
session, you name it. I mean, you know, that has to be part of the audition component. It has to.
It has to be. You know, and I tell students that I work with today that come in and they're already playing at a high level, but they can't read. And I say to them, I go, look, man, you have to become at least a functional reader. You have to be a functional reader. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't need to be, you don't have to read like you're reading Bach fugues for fun, but you have to become functional, man.
Yeah. And I tell my students that, you know, if you can't sight read effectively, I tell them, you know what, you can be the best player in the world, but you're never going to get it past a certain level of performance.
Right.
You know, you'll never do shows, you'll never do studio work.
You're right. That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
yeah, you can gig. You can gig as long as note reading isn't a requirement, because you know most piano players can play chord symbols,
Yeah, right.
so they can get through a gig. But if there's a heavy reading component involved, that separates the cans from the cans.
That's exactly right. So, hey Kent, did you have any siblings that did your mom and dad play music? Did you have siblings that play music? What was your household like?
Okay, yeah. My mom played piano growing up, and she also was involved in church music.
Okay.
Being in the choir and assisting on piano. I don't think I ever remember hearing her play organ, but she could play piano. And my dad had nothing to do with music. He could sing a mean Down in the Valley, and that's about it. I had two brothers and one sister, and they all took piano lessons. My sister did actually go beyond that, and she played piano in some shows.
Oh wow.
At the high school and the college level. So she was pretty good at it. And then later on, she was involved in church music as well.
Okay.
But nobody came close to taking it to the level that I decided to,
Right.
in terms of involvement and commitment and career choice.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting, right? The fact that you went to North Texas when you did, you're right. It's really it ends up being a sink or swim scenario for so many people when you get there. And if you can end up swimming instead of sinking, you grow a tremendous amount. And that's that has to be, I would have to think, because it was for me the tipping point for me as a musician. That was what got me over the hurdle, and I started actually developing and evolving into a professional musician.
Yeah. Yeah, well, sink or swim, you say. I think that my first 2 semesters at University of North Texas, looking back, I can safely say I sank. but I guess to my credit, I hung in there.
You did, man.
You know?
You did fantastic.
Sank, but I always thought that, well, there's going to be a point where I can get up and I can take a deep breath and still be alive. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, you know, we had great restaurants like the Flying Tomato to hang out in, and we had the Texas Pickup. Remember the old Texas Pickup? Oh man, that was awesome, man, dude.
Yeah, I think Bob. I think you and I actually shared quite a few lunches.
We did
after one of the music ed classes at the graduate level. Yeah, time to go there, or I don't know. We ate fast food quite a bit too.
We did. Yeah. That was fun. So okay, man. So all right. So then. You've touched upon it already, and I want you to talk about this a little bit. You're an educator. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're a teacher, man. You taught for many years at Booker T. Washington High School for the Performing Arts here in the Dallas area, which is fantastic. So talk a little bit about your teaching background and what that has done for you in your development as a professional jazz pianist.
Okay, so in terms of really serious involvement, it all started when I got a part-time position at Booker T. Washington High School for the Performing and Visual Arts.
Right.
Another factor that completely changed my life, because as you know, I eventually got the full-time position, and then as a result, the doctorate went by the wayside pretty much.
That's right. I remember.
But yeah, I started there in 1984. September of 1984, and was involved in part-time for, I don't know, about the next 6 years. And then I quit to resume studies at University of North Texas. And then after I was done with coursework at University of North Texas, I got a call from the coordinator, Dr. Douglas Cornell, who asked if I would be interested in applying for a full-time position because one of their piano teachers was moving. Her husband got a job transfer. So I said, sure, why not? I mean, I had graduated. I wasn't making a whole lot of money, doing a little gigging here and there, but that was about it. So I went down there, and the interview process wasn't very long, and they basically offered me the job on the spot.
Wow, fantastic.
And now I believe this is 1992, January of 1992. And lo and behold, the coordinator, Dr. Cornell, among the things that he got me assigned was a jazz piano class. Now, tell me how many high schools in the country have an actual class devoted to jazz piano?
Zero.
So that was really lucky for me. I think there were only like 6 or 7 kids that signed up, but that got my foot in the door really solidly down there.
Right.
And I never gave up that class pretty much for the next 25 or so years that I taught there full time.
Yeah, wow. That's fantastic.
But that teaching experience was wonderful. And then in all this, too, I've involved myself in a couple of community colleges. Of course, I mentioned the one, Collin College in Plano. And then I'm also involved in teaching jazz piano at Eastfield College in Mesquite.
Right.
But I have been involved with teaching, various subjects in the music field, ever since 1984. I mean, I still teach part-time, so.
Yeah. Is Chris Berg still there at Collin, at the school?
No, he's not there anymore. He hasn't been there for quite a few years.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. I didn't know. Who's the director there now?
I think Chris is the current director of the Dallas Youth Jazz Orchestra.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there, a gentleman, Dr. Heitlinger, was there through the end of last year, and I think they're still in process of finding a new full-time head of jazz studies at Collin College.
Oh, wow. Okay, very cool. Hey, man, why don't you apply for that?
A gentleman by the name of Pete Weesey, by the way, is kind of, what do you call that, temporary head, fine guitarist, and he is also the head of the jazz camp that I will be involved in next
Okay,
week.
great,
Yeah.
great.
No, Bob. Hey, man. I'm 27 years old. I mean, I've put in my time on the education thing. I think part time is enough for me.
Very good. So listen, with all your experience in teaching jazz piano to high school kids,
yeah,
right, aspiring,
pretty much high school and college.
Right. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that process a little bit, because jazz piano skill listeners, they're all students of this fabulous art form and trying to figure it out and discover the essential jazz piano skills to study and to play. So let's talk about the beginning jazz pianist for a second. Let's say you have somebody coming to you now, and think back, a young Kent Ellingson is coming to you now, right?
Oh no. I used to tell my students at Booker T that, you know what? If I, as a junior in high school, were in this class, I would hate that kid right now.
You would hate that kid. Okay. Well, now you got to teach that kid. So what are some of the things with a beginning jazz pianist? What are some of the skills that you immediately have them begin studying and begin practicing?
Okay, well, the very first thing is that I want to make sure that they have an understanding of seventh chords.
Correct.
That they know how to play a seventh chord. Of course, a person who doesn't have jazz experience, if I say, okay, can you play for me in F7? They're going to go like this.
100%. Yeah.
Traditional music theory root position seventh chord.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, I tried to get them to understand that the jazz voicing goes beyond a root position seventh chord, that you have to, you oftentimes include the 9. There are ways that you have to voice the chord in 2 hands. And of course, I don't know, Bob, if you learned it this way, but I think this is the way Dan Hurley taught the old A and B one-handed voicings, right?
Yes.
So, the A form, of course, says that the third of the chord is in the bottom. So a C7 would be, I don't know. I guess you can see that.
Yeah.
Be 3, 7, and 9.
Correct.
All right. And then you can also later on add the 5 if you want to create a 4-note voicing. The B form is with the 7th on the bottom. 7, 3, 5. And if you want to add the 4th note, you'd add the 9 right there.
Correct.
So it takes them a little while to understand that like a C7 can have an implied 9th and nobody's going to worry about it.
Right.
Nobody's going to worry about the label. So I really try very hard right off the bat to get these kids to understand that, when you're playing a voicing, this is the way you should consider it as a jazz player.
Right.
As compared to as a traditional pianist or traditional theory person. And I get them going as fast as I can on the blues.
Right.
12-bar blues, no more than 3 chords, right?
Right.
So blues in C. So I actually have a worksheet I made, and it's sort of based on what I learned from Dan my first semester at University of North Texas, where I've got the chord, and it's going to be in an A or B form voicing, and then I've got a walking bass line. So I'll just give a 4-measure example. So it's going to go... etc. Okay, I think you probably remember that sheet that Dan had. Similar to that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Then of course we have to talk. Once the kids get comfortable with that, we have to talk about soloing options. So I write out the blues scale, and of course C blues. Okay, I'll say, you know what? If you don't feel comfortable playing more than, let's say, 3 notes out of those 6, I'm fine with that. Just try to make some sense, and also don't forget what the swing fill is all about.
Right.
When they become comfortable with that, then what I'll do is I'll add those notes that end up, also making equivalents to the blues scale 6th degree, where in the C blues you're adding the 9 or the 2, let's say the 2, you're adding the major 3rd, and you're adding the major 6th. And then I typically tell them, I go, if you don't think that this isn't part of the blues makeup, listen to any Oscar Peterson blues tune, because he will incorporate those notes ad nauseum.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's like a major blues sound,
That's right. That's right. In fact,
that's how I'll start the kids off.
Yeah.
Then when I feel they're ready to do it, we will talk about the 2-5-1 progression.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I mean, yeah, bebop era is long gone, but a piano player has to know how to effectively play 2-5-1s basically in any kind of music.
That's exactly right. Well, that circle motion, right? I always tell students, look, chord changes move 3 ways: circle movement, diatonic movement, chromatic movement. That's it. That's all we got, right? And circle movement being 90+% of the time. That, if you take any standard and you take a yellow highlighter and you go, I'm going to go through this fake book and I'm going to highlight all the circle movement on every tune, and you just took a yellow highlighter and everywhere the circle movement occurred, you highlighted it. To your amazement, at the end, you'd look at your sheet and it would be primarily yellow lines going across the entire lead sheet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when I teach the kids 2-5-1s, of course we have to know both the A and the B form, right?
Right.
So I will teach them. Originally, I will have them try to play, like I learned from Dan Hurley, try to play them down in whole steps. Right. So it goes like in the key of C. Then you lower the 3rd and the 7th.
Correct.
The C becomes a minor 2. And going down that whole step descending progression.
Yeah.
Then I will have them work half steps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, nice.
Etc.
Yeah.
And then if I feel like they need more work in that, and I should just be more of a stickler on this, but here's where like circle of 5th progression comes into play. So you do a 2-5-1 in C, 2-5-1 in F, 2-5-1 in B flat, 2-5-1 in E flat to get that circle of 5ths concept going in your head.
Correct.
But it's like the modern jazz pieces don't really employ this concept. so much, but it's still important. It's like it's basic to being a jazz piano player that you have to have total mastery of the 2-5-1 concept.
No doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. I learned. I don't. You remember the old John Mahegan books?
Oh yeah, I've got them all.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, John Mahegan.
One, but
he's got that chart in there. I think it's Jazz Pianist Book 2, or I can't remember which one. And it's got. In fact, I might have it here. Hang on a second. This is where, when you talk about things that have a profound impact on your life. Yeah, I do have it. Check it out, man. Check this out. Remember this? The Jazz Pianist by John Mahegan. Book 2.
Yeah, now what volume is that?
That's book 2.
Okay, book 2, okay.
Yeah, and in this book, right, there's a page that changed my life. Page 22. Look what it says. The 60 jazz chords.
Oh yeah, great.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's got major, dominant, minor, half diminished, diminished for all families, right? All 12 notes. And so I always tell students that, look, man, that's like musical gold right there on that piece of paper, that one piece of paper, that you have to be able to play those 60 sounds, right? Those 5 sounds, major, dominant, minor, half diminished, and diminished, right? For each note, 60 chords.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I get students started on that, and then improv, right? You jump to the blues, which I like. That's a great approach. I do that too, but I even back up from that, and I'll say, here's a C major 7, C, E, G, B. Let's improvise, and you can use the notes C, E, G, B.
It's a great way to get them, to relating the chord to soloing options.
Yeah, because right. Because you know what, I always try to stress, and I think you would agree, right? I tell students all the time, look, jazz is the study of shapes and sounds. So every sound in music, if we're talking about a major sound, that major sound can be played harmonically, and that major sound can be played melodically. Mm-hmm. Right? It's one sound played harmonically, played melodically. So it's like a solid liquid relationship. It's like an ice cube water relationship, right?
Right.
And so when you play a C major 7 in your left hand and you improvise melodically using the notes C, E, G, B, you have the harmonic and melodic relationship of this sound.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Now, Bob, interesting that you would point out those different types of seventh chords that you have to learn in every key, right?
Right.
From the Mahegan book. And so I have related that whole thing to what I have learned from the Frank Mantooth book.
Oh, Frank Mantooth, yeah, the voicings book.
Yeah. So because, well, let me backtrack here for just a second, okay? So when we're talking 2-5-1s, and so what I'll do is I'll try to find pieces that have a lot of 2-5-1s in them for the kids, and then we'll talk about soloing. And I always tell them the easiest way to solo over a 2-5-1 is to simply use notes of the major scale of the 1 chord.
Right.
For all 3 chords.
Right.
Okay. Now, if we're getting into alterations, that's a different. That's a different
ballgame.
Then
right?
That's a more advanced concept.
Yeah, right.
But so I'll do that with the kids, and then we will play several pieces that have the kids playing the melody and then chords in the left hand. But then at some point, I have to introduce them to voicings. Two-handed voicings for piano. And this is where I found the value of the Frank Mantooth book, because he spells that out very, very effectively, and it's easy to learn. He talks about, the kind of voicings that we learned in Dan Hurley's masterclass, right? The minor fourthy type voicings, D minor.
Yeah.
Those, I believe Frank Mantooth refers to those as miracle voicings, because they apply to different quality concepts.
That's right.
And then he also talks about generic voicings, and this is where he seriously gets into all of the types of seventh chords.
Right.
So I actually ended up writing out a sheet that basically summarized those 2 types of voicings. And really, in essence, I think I covered maybe 80% of that book from that one sheet that I typed out that's got both the miracle voicings and the generic voicings.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that book, and that book can, I think personally, I think that's the best voicing book that's been released on the market, quite honestly.
I agree. I'm going to agree with you right there.
Yeah.
Also, we can't skip the fact that Dan Hurley has also come out with incredible books, not just only jazz piano, but just jazz theory and jazz concepts in general.
Well, Mantooth is a Hurley guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, Mantooth is a North Texas guy. You know,
Right.
he was a North Texas guy, and yeah. So it's amazing the influence of Dan and all the all these books and educators, especially on the jazz piano side, that have been heavily influenced by Dan over the decades.
Yeah, so those of you listening out there are going to be two books that I highly recommend for you to get. One from each of these guys. Dan Hurley, well, he's got all of his improv books, and they're great to get. I really, truly like The Jazz Language. Jazz Language explains jazz theory better than any other book I think I have ever owned or looked at.
I just talked about that on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, that if I had to pick one book, if I had to pick one jazz theory book, you're going to drop me on a deserted island somewhere, I take Dan Hurley's Jazz Language. It's a classic.
Yeah. And then on the Frank Mantooth side, now, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, isn't it called Voicings for Jazz Piano or something very similar to that?
Yes.
Frank Mantooth, Voicings for Jazz Piano or Voicings for Keyboard.
Yeah, if you just do a search for Voicings Frank Mantooth,
yeah,
you're going to find
everybody, get those two books. If you want to succeed in jazz piano, you can't go wrong.
That's exactly 100% correct. That's right. So, okay, so you get them going on the blues, which is fantastic. 2-5-1 progressions, which is fantastic. What other scales? What about scales and arpeggios? How do you approach that with students, the practicing the scales and arpeggios?
Well, of course, the scales are very complicated because you have this concept called a chord-scale relationship.
Right.
And another Dan Hurley book to get, Scales for Jazz Improvisation. So then you have to discuss with kids, the modes and what mode fits into a given chord symbol. And you have to talk about other scales that are used in jazz, the diminished scale, the augmented scale.
Right.
The scale that I always refer to as the Superlocrian scale. Right. Which has its place in, from altered seventh chords to various chord symbols that stem from the melodic minor scale.
Right.
And so, it is very important for students to have regular scale study. But again, here too, for reference, I would get Dan Hurley's Scales for Jazz Improvisation book.
Yeah, that's great.
And Bob, I will tell you that when I was at school before University of North Texas, one of the things that I did do was I practiced my scales a whole bunch.
Yeah, right.
Like a whole bunch.
Right.
To where that I would probably devote the better part of an hour of practice time a day to nothing but scale practice.
Yeah, right. Right.
And I think it made a big difference in my life going into the second year of that jazz band.
Yeah. just from a technique perspective, right? Right. And, chord scale relationships aside, just for technical agility, hand mobility, moving around on the keyboard, right?
Yeah, right. Teaching kids or having kids work with arpeggios, I know that's real important. For me, as a jazz performer, I am more concerned about them getting the concept of voicings, whether they hold them. And of course, the arpeggios are effective practice for use when you're, like, for example, when you're soloing over bebop, when you're trying to solo bebop lines. So many of the bebop licks that we've come to know and love involve arpeggios, like a chromatic half step leading into a chord tone going right up the arpeggio. Yeah. Through the 9 and even the 11 and 13.
Yeah. It's important. You want to hear something clever, man? When I had Bert Ligon on Jazz Piano Skills, he says to me, he goes, "Bob, I don't practice scales anymore." I said, "You don't practice scales anymore?" He goes, "No." He says, "I practice arpeggios with passing tones."
Yeah. That's right. And speaking of 2-5-1s,
yes.
Okay, the Jamie Aebersold Volume 3, another book and I don't know. They probably have it. You probably can get it streamed now. Who knows?
Yeah.
You know,
Is that the 251 collection?
Yeah, the 251 progression.
Yeah.
Included in that booklet is also a smaller booklet of nothing but jazz piano voicings for 251 and also licks for 251 that start on the third, that start on the fifth, that start on the major seventh.
Right.
And if you look deeply into those licks, you will see to the extent that arpeggios are used. That's all I can say about that.
Right. Yep. See what you think about this. When I teach scales now, Kent, I teach scales in relationship to sound. So what I mean by that is, like, I will have a C major scale that you play from the root to the seventh. So I'm telling students all the time that your entry point and your destination point must be different. You cannot play octave to octave because your ears are deactivated, because all your ears are hearing is do, 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 do. If you practice root to seven, major seven sound, root to seven, dominant seven scale, root to seven, minor scale, Dorian, root to seven, half diminished, root to seven, diminished, right? That now your ears become actively engaged. So I have them practice scales, root to seven, 3 to 9, 5 to 11, 7 to 13. So they're hearing these sound fragments, the fragments within the sound, right? The other thing too about modes, chord scale relationships that I like to teach, I teach play the C dominant scale. So it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat. I don't make any mention to F major because I want them to see that as C. I don't say Mixolydian. I just say that's the C dominant scale. And then I'll say, play the C minor scale, C, D, E flat, G, A, B flat. And I go, there you go, man, C minor scale. I don't get into the Dorian stuff right away because I just want them to equate C minor chord, C minor scale, C major scale, C major chord, C major scale. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's effective. I probably, unlike you, I probably spend more time trying to get them to relate the mode to the chord symbol than you do. But your method of exposing the kids to that sound, that's great. I'll have to try it out sometime.
Yeah.
And one more thing, Bob, speaking of, and I'm sure you deal with this too. The notion that, like, the beginning jazz players will overemphasize the one on everything.
Yeah.
Like, okay, play this over a C dominant seven, and they'll always start with one.
Yes.
And inevitably, most of the time, they'll end with one too.
Right.
And so I really try to spend some time encouraging the kids not to start with the note one, certainly not to end it with one, but to be able to explore the other sounds that are involved in that mode.
Yeah, 100%, because you want to become root independent, man. You do not want to be one all the time. Right.
And of course, if you get to the point with a student where they're actually doing some transcribing of solos, great solos, you will see the importance of avoiding one plays in everybody's improvisatory life.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really important. That's one of the reasons why I have them play scales like from 3 to 9 or 5 to 11 or 7 to 13.
Yeah, and I can see the beauty of that. That's great.
And I get them then. I also get them arpeggiating like that as well, right? So if it's a C, if we're talking C dominant 7, I have them arpeggiating 3 to 9. I have them arpeggiate from 5 to 11. Have them arpeggiate from that B flat up to the A, 7 to 13, right? So without fail, they go, wait a minute, man, that's like a B flat major.
Right.
And I go, I said, see, it's all about shapes and sounds, right?
Uh-huh.
You have to know these shapes and correlate the shapes to these sounds.
Yeah, and Bob, learning 2-5-1s too, like like a D minor 7 as a 2.
Yeah.
And then they'll look at it and go, hey, wait a second, that's not D minor, that's F major. And I'll tell them, well, look at what you're playing in the left hand.
Yeah, right.
That cancels that out, and it becomes a D minor chord. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, okay. So then, all right. So these are some of the essential skills, right? You got your voicings, you got your scales and arpeggios, you got your blues progression, you got your blues patterns that you use for improvising. What about, do you have students? I like to have students isolate a sound. I think that, for improvisation purposes, like I always tell them, I go, look, if Miles Davis came back to life and he walked into my office and said, let's play. And I said, great. And he's getting his horn out and, blowing in his mouthpiece. And he said to me, and he would say to me, what do you want to play? If I said to Miles, let's play C minor, man, Miles would go, okay, do you want to start or do you want me to start? And my point being is that would not be a foreign concept to him, right? The idea of let's take a minor sound and let's just create a backing track or something that's going to just play that minor sound so we can bathe in it, and let's improvise on that minor sound. Explore everything from the root to the 13th of the sound, inside, outside playing, all kinds of stuff. But let's isolate this sound and practice playing and exploring, as I like to say, bathe in that sound. What are your thoughts on that, to have students do that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And what I like about that is that you're getting away from over reliance on knowing traditional harmonic concepts, knowing traditional jazz theory concept. You're just going for a sound, which means that the student's ears have to do the work.
Correct.
Yeah, rather than relying on, some scale or some chord. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Bob.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ken, what's fun about this? What's so fun about this, man? This is how we used to talk 40 years ago, man. We would talk about these things, man. In the hall, this is the stuff we'd talk about in the hallways, man. What about doing this? What about doing that? What do you think about this? It's fantastic.
And would you not agree, Bob, that our classes with Dan Hurley, I mean, one of the beauties of the class that had nothing to do with learning your scales or chords or whatever is that I've always felt like he introduced concepts to make you think.
Oh, all the time.
And so I would leave his class thinking, yeah, well, okay, so this is what I think he meant, and that's awesome. Yeah.
Remember that keyboard lab that we were all in that? You're in that keyboard lab, and then like those skills that you were just playing earlier.
Yeah.
He'd call you up to the front of the room, and on quiz, you'd have to pass, right? You'd have to pass it. So he'd call you up in the front of the room. You sit down at the keyboard. He'd turn the metronome on or whatever. You'd have to play those skills, and all the other piano cats are sitting in the room watching you, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, so I think, Bob, a lot of them were on their headsets, and looking real nervous, like, how am I going to pass this at all 12 keys?
In all 12 keys.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were good days, man.
Yeah, they were. And what a great learning opportunity, Bob. To have a class based primarily on drills.
That's what it was.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Here's the skills that you need. You have to be able to play these skills, or you're not going to go any further. Further. You're not going any further.
Yeah, it really solidified things, for both you and I.
Oh, no doubt.
Yep.
So, okay, I want you to talk just real briefly too. How do you advise people? I get this question a lot. How much time should I practice? How much time every day should I be putting in? What are your thoughts on that? So I get that question. I know you get that question. How do you answer that question?
I like to call it, how much time a day should I spend on my jazz growth? And so, for me, practicing is only part of the 24-hour day. It's only part of it. And so, you practice, and another great Dan Hurley concept. You don't practice what you know. You practice what you don't know.
No, that's exactly right.
I'm not going to sit and for the next 2 hours after we're done with this, practice my C blues. I'm just not going to do it. But what I might do is practice something else, practice something that I don't feel as comfortable in.
Yeah.
Maybe go to an old solo transcription and work on some of that. And Bob, the other thing, okay, so the actual hands-on nuts and bolts practicing, oh boy. Well, if a student can put in a couple hours a day, that's wonderful.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful. But what we haven't touched upon is things like jazz listening. How much time are you going to spend a day listening to jazz? And when we listen to jazz as an educational, growth, what are we listening to? Like, I'm not going to put on my favorite Oscar Peterson album and put it on for the next 3 hours and say, yeah, I listened to 3 hours of jazz. No, you have to vary yourself. But for us piano players, you have to really know the heritage of your instrument. So you have to know all the players. You have to go way back. You have to go back to Fats Waller. You got to go back to Art Tatum and even before then.
Father Hines.
And so the listening is so important. So is listening a form of practice? If you are listening with concentrated intent, I say yes.
Absolutely. Okay. I amen to that. I agree 100%.
And then, like, Bob, do we call, like, learning real book tunes? Is that practicing? Somewhat. To some extent it is. But when I think of practicing, you are practicing your skill set to make you a better player.
There you go. Amen. You're preaching to the choir here, Kent. You're preaching to the choir. Because
so if I were to answer that, question, how much overall jazz growth should a person engage in a day? Basically, all I could say is the more the better.
Yeah.
But how much strict mechanical practicing?
Yeah.
I think if you're able to put in a couple hours, you're doing really good.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, because I think everybody always equates practicing with your butt being on the bench and you're pushing keys down. And that's just some of it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm always talking about practicing away from the instrument. So paper practice. Can you spell your dominant chords? Can you spell your minor chords? Do you know what they are? Because I tell students all the time, it's your conceptual understanding that drives your physical development. So
exactly.
If jazz is foggy or complicated or fragmented here, I got news for you. It's foggy, fragmented, and complicated here. So you have to sort out the details conceptually first, and that will govern how you practice. So I agree with you 100%. Just you got to get away from the mindset of practicing always being butt on bench, hands on keys, pushing buttons.
And Bob, can I add one more thing?
Sure.
This is to everybody out there. Playing a gig is not practicing. Okay, so don't come up to me and say, "Yeah, well, I didn't spend any time at home working on anything, but I did have a gig tonight." So nope, doesn't count.
Yeah. Playing bad Leroy Brown for the 500th time is not going to.
That does not equivalent to practicing. That is correct, Bob. Yep.
New York is not practicing. So. Right.
Yeah. Well, Bob, but taking it on a more advanced level, even like playing, let's say you're playing a jazz club, something like, the Balcony Club or one of the jazz clubs in Fort Worth or whatever, and you're playing jazz, but you're not, you're basically playing what you already know.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Don't practice what you know, practice what you don't know. So no matter what the gig is, I don't equivalent. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
I do not make that equal to practicing in any way, shape, or form.
I agree with that 100%. Another thing that I always stress too, Ken, I always say one practice session, talking about, let's say, applying it to butt on bench, hands on keys. I always say one practice session should always have one practice objective. So if you sit down before you even sit on the bench, what is it that you are going to be practicing? And if you put in 20 minutes of focused practice on a single practice session with a single practice objective, you will have great success. The problem is people sit on the bench and they go, okay, what do I want to practice? And they scattershoot. They just scattershot all over the place, and they really get nothing done. They think they've sat there for an hour or 2 hours and did a bunch of stuff, but it was really counterproductive.
Yeah, well, Bob, and here too, this is where good teaching comes into play, because a good teacher is going to have this organization and this mindset already established to where they can help the student decide, okay, what is your objective or objectives for the next lesson, and something specific.
Right. Right.
So.
Yeah.
The importance of teaching in jazz education.
Oh my gosh! Right, because and hey, Kent, we didn't even have to deal with this. Check this out. When it was bad enough listen, it was bad enough when back in the 80s, we'd go to Pender's Music there in Denton, and you'd go and you look at all the materials, the books on the shelves that you could get. It was bad enough then. But the blind alleys that you can run down now with YouTube and all the internet and the people telling you what you should be practicing and what, there's a lot of blind alleys you can be running down that you can get led down very easily if you're out there on your own just trying to figure things out.
Yeah, I agree. I agree totally. Yep.
Yeah, So anyway, man. So let's talk professionally, man. What are some of the professional things that you have coming up, endeavors? You've already mentioned you're going to be doing the jazz camp next week at Collin County.
Yeah, and by the way, on Thursday night, there is a faculty concert with our guest artist, Mr. Adam Larson, saxophonist from New York. And so it's free. So I'm inviting anybody who might see this video before then, this coming Thursday, which I believe is June 27th.
Right.
Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Yep. And I think the concert is at 7:30. So please come out if you can. Okay. I'm gonna relay a couple things that I'm involved in. I have my own group along with my wife, who's a vocalist, Kay.
Yeah.
And we play at the Balcony Club in Dallas every first Sunday of the month, 5:30. And there's no cover, so I'd love to have anybody, if you're in the Dallas area or for any Dallasites that are listening to this, please come out. We have a great time, and we have fun, and we try to play some good music too.
Okay, so that's the first Sunday of every month?
First Sunday of every month.
Yep,
5:30 to about 7:40.
Oh, bro, I'm going to be there. I'm going to just show up one of those Sundays, man, and just when you hear some heckling coming from the back of the room, you know who it is, man.
Well, when I hear, yeah, man, I'll know it's you, buddy.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, one more thing I would like to say in case anybody can come out. Every year, the Dallas Jazz Piano Society has a performance series.
Yes.
And I am going to be on this year's performance series, and it's going to be at Steinway Hall, Plano. I know it's a long way off. It's on November 19th.
Oh, okay.
And I think it starts at 7 o'clock. I'm going to try to do a tribute to Oscar Peterson.
Wow. Yeah. Holy cow. So
I'll be in a trio format, and it's free. So anybody who can come out, and by the way, Lynn Seaton will be on bass.
Wow. And
my good friend Kent Hillman, the drummer who's got the best first name in Dallas, Kent Hillman will be on drums. It's a free concert. Please come out. Love to have you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Hey, make sure I'm going to post all your links in the show notes, websites and anything you want posted. Please let me know. I want to include that in the show notes for the listeners so they can reach out to you or come and check you out and play. If they're listening and they're here in the Dallas area, that would be fantastic. So,
Bob, also, I'm leaving you my email address, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so anybody who might have a question or comment or whatever, as soon as I get you my email, I'm happy to answer anybody who would have a question based on this video.
That's awesome. Yeah, and Ken, all this will be posted YouTube, of course, and then the podcast itself, and on all the major podcast directories, from Spotify to Apple to iHeartRadio, Pandora, and so forth. So,
great.
Hey, buddy, I tell you what, man. I told you this was going to feel like about 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, man, this has been fun, Bob. And Bob, we need to get together.
Oh my God,
we just need to get together sometime.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We're going to make that happen. We're going to make that happen because 40 years is way too long.
Oh, and you haven't changed a bit, by the way.
Oh yeah, you haven't either, man. Thanks, man. So but what this proves, man? Kent, I'm going to tell you, man. Here's what this proves. Genuine friendship is forever, man. And
yeah, no kidding, man.
I mean, here we are. We haven't been able to hang for a long time, but I feel like we just hung yesterday. I mean, it's just been a blessing to get to know you. One of my highlights at North Texas, when I think back of my days at North Texas State, you pop into that memory immediately. So I can't thank you. Yeah, man, I can't thank you enough. I love you, brother, and we got to spend.
Love you too, bro.
Yeah, we got to spend a lot.
We will get together sometime soon.
Oh my gosh, absolutely, Ken. Man, I can't even thank. I know you're incredibly busy. I'll let you go. I can't even thank you enough, man, for carving out time to spend with me today. And it's so.
Oh, this has been my pleasure, and this has been a lot of fun, Bob.
Awesome.
We'll have to do it again sometime.
Oh, we will. Hey, man, I'm going to have you back on, man. That's awesome. All right. Thank you, Kent.
Take care, Bob. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, brother. Bye-bye.